that?
First time, baby.
It's amazing. You know what you're doing.
Do we?
Have we ever?
Hey,
Everybody.
Ryan. So, another episode of Going Deep. I don't really have a set topic.
Well, do we need to preface it a little bit by what's been going on?
What's been going on? What's been going on?
Well, 2 weeks ago.
All right, so there was kind of a debacle of an episode a couple weeks ago. If you're one of the 16 people who saw it, actually one of them would have been me, so maybe 15 people who saw it, then feel lucky.
Yeah.
Because we quickly took that down the next morning.
Once we realized we were singing, playing the guitar, we went, oh boy. The night just kind of got away from us, and we don't intend to do that again.
But then last week, we had Sean here, and we tried to go live, and we were having technical difficulties.
Technical difficulties, or...
All right,
We'll call it.
I forgot to change the microphone setting, and so we couldn't figure out why we were just getting a buzzing sound. But I figured it out, so here we are.
So we're back, and so this is kind of just a episode. We're going to give you a couple updates, tell you a little bit about what's going on, what we're working on right now.
One thing I wanted to mention is that part 2 of David Johnson's episode of The Underground is going to be up at 9 o'clock, about a half hour from now.
Yeah.
9 daylight savings time, is it now? Instead of mountain
you have
time?
to call it, yep. Well, 9 mountain time, daylight savings time, wouldn't you say?
That's a lot to say.
is
9
a lot.
o'clock mountain time, daylight savings time? No, you wouldn't say that.
It would be MDT, Mountain Daylight Time.
Right, you're right. I think that's
MDT.
right. So anyway, in about a half hour.
What did you just say?
I said anyway.
Before that. You said something.
I don't know.
You did. You said, you said,
Oh, Jesus. Fuck.
you're right.
If there's one person who loves
No.
being right.
It's the fact that I'm never right.
Oh, not in your mind.
Cheers to that.
But anyway, so hopefully you saw part 1 of Johnson's story. Although we know Johnson from Australia because he was in our mission.
David, to the rest of you, was his name.
He has a bit different of a story than us. He not only dealt with the transition out of organized religion, but he also dealt with substance abuse and exploring other religions and all kinds of stuff. And so it was a really good episode that ended up going longer than we anticipated. So we cut it up into the 2 parts, and that second part will be up tonight.
We've had some issues it's been a year now. It's been a year.
We'll have to look and see when the first episode came out, what the date was.
Well, it was April. I know that was in April. But we started recording on...
Are we going to have a party?
Should we? Let's have a meet and greet with the Underground at about time.
We'll have the 2 people.
Hey, that's cool. Would you all be open to a meet and greet with the Underground at about time? Come
Cindy,
have some,
you going to come out to Utah?
come have some beers with us at the bar. It was March 13th was the night that we filmed that first episode, and I think it was like April 4th was the one that when it first aired.
Yeah, it's been, I mentioned this. It's been it seems fast and forever at the same time. So I kind of relate everything that's happened with COVID when everything got shut down because of Rudy Gobert and the Utah Jazz. For those of you who don't know, I work at Vivint Arena where the Jazz play. And so that was a big deal in our world. Not that it wasn't in everybody's world, but it was like we knew about it. And I think we had a couple events at the arena after that, and I just remember talking to people there and just being like unsure what it was going to mean and everything. And so that the game that all went down, if you're unfamiliar.
Are you talking about the game where they pulled him, or when they canceled it?
That there's no game they pulled him. So the story is, they went to Oklahoma City. He got sick, and he was feeling okay. So they gave him the test, but he was feeling okay, and everything was good for him to play that night if he came back positive. But he ended up not going to the arena. He was in his hotel, and all of a sudden you're watching this game, and doctors start rushing out onto the floor and tell the coaches that his test had come back positive. And that's really what led to
the NBA shutdown.
Well, it led to the NBA shutdown, which led to other sports. I mean, there was no NCAA tournament last year. That was the culminating point to everything happening as far as being shut down and stuff. And so that was March. So that game against Oklahoma City was March 11th. So yeah, it's been a year for a lot of things.
I remember it being the Monday of that week. So we filmed on Friday. March 11th was Wednesday. So the Monday of that week, we got the announcement from Pearl Jam. We had tickets to see Pearl Jam in
San
Diego, like April 13th, somewhere around there. And they announced that they were not going out on tour for their Gigaton album, which was just like, oh crap. And then it just was like one thing after another. And we were still planning on doing this anyways. We'd been talking about doing it. It was on the calendar. And so the first night was March 13th when we all got together from episode 1 and down in my basement.
So that was a year yesterday.
A year yesterday.
Oh,
wow.
It's crazy.
That is crazy. Think about that. So cheers to a year of doing this. And look, we're just figuring this out.
After a year, we're still figuring it out.
Oh, yeah. We're still trying to figure it out. We know there's more to do. We know there's more people that we want to reach. We know, we were just talking at dinner on Saturday night with Skip and Sierra about wanting people from other denominations. Mainly it's been entirely people from the LDS faith that have come onto the underground and shared their stories. And that's great. And we understand that because we're local here. But look, if there's people that are watching this from anywhere else in the world that are a different denomination, we'll talk with you. We'd love to talk with you, actually, because we would like to see what parallels there are in your world compared to the world that we grew up in.
Because I think there's going to be a lot of parallels. And one of the things that we're going to talk a little bit about tonight is everything that's gone down in the last week or two with Prince Harry and Meghan and the royal family and everything. Mainly just because it's very similar in the control and that is over them, and having to get out of that kind of a cult-like experience.
I was just looking to see if we had comments or anything like that.
But yeah, so I think it'd be interesting to get other, stories from outside of the Mormon religion, because they'll be a little different, but I think a lot of the underlying things will be similar.
Yeah, definitely. So if you're watching this, and if you belong to a different denomination, then email us at wearetheunderground3, the number 3, at gmail.com, and let's talk. Let's just figure out if that might be a good thing to have you on the show. We'd love to have it. We'd love to keep going. We want to keep doing these. If anything, it's just a great opportunity to get together and hang out for us, and we like putting content out there.
We've made a friend out of somebody who found us on Reddit, who is here in Salt Lake. And
what's up, Ryan?
We actually filmed an episode with him a couple months back.
Back in October.
And now I'm convinced that issue was the same issue we had last week.
Because it was the exact same noise? Oh, okay. All right.
So anyway, I went to start editing it a couple weeks ago, and there's no sound other than just a humming noise. And so we're gonna reshoot that episode, so we'll have that coming up. And we've also got, we want to get the other people from the underground. If you haven't watched it, which I think most people who've watched any of these episodes have watched it, but the episodes about our mission and being sent home, there were 5 of us, so we'd like to certainly get some more of those guys that came home with us, as well as other people from our mission.
You got a date on your calendar set with one of them. You're going to hang out with Fox.
I am.
So, Fox, let's get you on the show. And
Yeah.
JJ down in St. George.
So we've got other people within our Mormon world that will certainly, or hopefully, if they're willing, get together and hear their stories. But we'd like to branch out as well.
Yeah.
So, so for this, like I said, I wanted to talk a little bit about the whole royal issue. But what else has been going on? You're up with current events.
In the world? Oh, I'm not. We were talking and it was funny because he was like, what if we just talked about some issues that were taking place? And I said, oh, cool. We can call it, what did I name it? Like something like,
I don't know what you're talking about.
it was the conversation we had like an hour
I
and a half
remember
ago.
you calling it anything.
I'm like, we can call it like current events with Scott or bringing Scott up to speed because Scott doesn't have cable.
Or internet, so he can't get on his phone and look at things that are happening.
I have
Like
the internet.
most people in the world.
Otherwise, we wouldn't be broadcasting. No, I don't have cable. I don't need it. I don't want it. So
You don't have to have cable to know what's going on.
well, I don't want to read the news on my phone and it's just how much do you believe? How much are you being fed? If Sean was here, he'd back me up, right? I mean, who knows what's what.
So how about Mars?
Hey, Cindy says something. Would love for you guys to review the documentary, The Mormon Murders. Oh!
Have you finished it?
No, but Rick has.
I have finished it. So it's funny because
Cindy is watching. Thank you,
actually
Cindy.
that's a good call, Cindy, and that is something I've wanted to talk about. So if you're not familiar, there's a new documentary on Netflix called Murder Amongst the Mormons, and it's about a guy named Mark Hoffman.
Mark David Hoffman.
Mark Hoffman.
Is it David? No.
Nobody comes.
That's David. I'm thinking John Lennon. Mark David Chapman.
Anyway, so people in Utah, so my family moved to Utah in 81, I think. So we've been here for a few years, but all of this occurred in 85. So I was 10, 11, whenever it happened. I remembered the name Mark Hoffman, and I remembered that there were some bombings, but I didn't know really any of the details. So essentially it's about this guy, Mark Hoffman, who grew up in the church, and he got into...
He was full on, went on a mission, went to church every Sunday, grew up.
But the documentary also talks about how he kind of stopped believing it early on, too.
Oh, yeah.
But he got into...
Is he alive or is he dead?
He's still alive.
Did they interview him?
No, it says at the end that he did not respond to their attempts to contact him to be interviewed. He tried to commit suicide.
What a bummer. That's a bummer.
So, anyway, he was in the church. He got into finding historical books and documents within the church, but also just American history and stuff. And so it's a 3-episode documentary. And, I mean, I don't want to give away too many spoilers.
Well, Cindy, what do you want to know? You want to know...
I mean, I guess if you haven't watched it and you're wanting to watch it, then go ahead and turn this off and save it for later. So I'll just get into it.
Because he basically...
So the first episode is based around 2 main things. they talk about a thing called the Salamander Letter, which I had no knowledge of. But the Salamander Letter was... So, I guess we have to do a little bit of backstory.
Go watch the podcast Naked Mormonism.
So the Mormon Church was started by Joseph Smith. This Salamander Letter was a letter that was written by by Martin Harris, who was one of the guys who
the guy that paid for the Book of Mormon to be made,
and was one of the witnesses to the golden plates.
He
and stuff.
bankrolled Joseph Smith in the production of the Book of Mormon.
Anyway, this letter talked about a different version of the story that the Mormon Church knows in terms of how Joseph got the golden plates that he translated, which became the Book of Mormon. And in it was a white salamander that directed him to the plates.
And it completely contradicts the historical...
So the Mormon historical story is that an angel named Moroni came to Joseph.
And Moroni, for all of you non-members out there watching, and I did say use non-members, sorry. But for the non-members, Moroni, if you ever see a Mormon temple, he's that golden dude holding up the trumpet on the top of the temple. That's Moroni. Moroni apparently appeared to Joseph Smith, showed him where the place was.
So the story you're taught that everyone believes within the church is that Moroni appeared to Joseph one night in his bedroom and told him, as he was struggling to decide which church to join none of them, that he would be directed later on to bring Christ's real church back to the earth, and ended up directing him to these gold plates. And so now you've got this letter saying that this white salamander was the thing that directed him. So it's completely...
So here's the question. This is actually coming from Cindy. You can't read it because someone asked it to you. Would the church really pay that much money to cover up something?
So I'm going to get into this, actually, because I had a conversation yesterday with my sister and brother-in-law about it. And so, but to get to that point...
The answer is yes,
So you've got the letter, and you've got some other documents that Mark Kaufman has obtained that are from Joseph Smith's mother. And in these documents, it's supposed to explain how it was Joseph's older brother Hiram who was the one that actually got the plates first. And so another big contradiction. And so that whole first episode is kind of about those two things. And at the end of it, I just remember thinking, how the fuck does the church refute that? Because the other part of it is that they were selling these to the church because there are these historical documents that the church wants to get their hands on. And from a non-Mormon point of view, the viewpoint that I had of it was, you want to buy these. They were convinced that they were real documents.
The FBI checked them, didn't they?
They had different specialists, and eventually the FBI authenticated all of them. So the church bought the Salamander Letter from them, and they were working on a deal for these other documents. I forget what they're called.
And wasn't it Gordon B. Hinckley who was kind of overseeing all of it?
Well, I mean, because he was the prophet at the time.
No, he wasn't.
Who was?
Spencer W. Kimball. In like 85? Gordon B. Hinckley wasn't the prophet till we were on our missions, dude. We were called by Ezra Taft Benson, then it was Howard Hunter, and then we got Gordon B.
Well, whatever.
No, not whatever.
I don't remember.
See, that's why I always take credit when I'm right, because it's always like, whatever. Gordon B. Hinckley was the prophet in the late 90s.
Okay.
During this time, it was Spencer W. Kimball.
Regardless, the church was convinced they were true, and they bought the Salamander Letter. They were supposedly in the process of buying these other documents that were from Joseph Smith's mother. And
Lucy Smith.
That's Lucy Mack Smith. And that's where the first episode kind of ends. You're going to roll your eyes at that?
You corrected me. That's fine. Lucy Mack.
You remember when we were trying to come up with Mark Hoffman's name? You remember you throwing that David in there? So the first episode ends with they've bought the salamander letter, they're convinced all these are true, and there's a deal going down for them to purchase these other documents. And
yeah, Cindy, it was a cover-up. They
So
were covering
that's-
it up because it was so not what they had been teaching for, but what, 85?
Because the
by this time, it's like
damage-
150 years, they had been teaching a different doctrine of how...
And the damage this would do to a lot, like you're going to have some members that will look past it or whatever, but I mean, there's going to be a lot of people that are like, what the hell? And so, yeah, they kind of wanted to buy it and just keep it, undercover. So then the second episode starts. And the second episode is when you start to learn how Mark Hoffman was a master forger. And towards the end, third episode, I mean, essentially they're talking about how there's never been a forgery case like this one.
and how
But the thing is, it's not just the Mormon documents. He forged
Like Revolutionary War
historical
ones, did he?
American documents and all kind. Like they said, there was stuff from George Washington, from Abraham Lincoln, from I think Samuel Adams. So he was doing a lot of it. And so then you're just like, oh, well, he forged them all. So the story is that he, the other documents he was trying to sell, in order to obtain them, he had to kind of have somebody be his money man. So he went to this local guy who gave him $160,000 or something to obtain these records, in which they were then going to sell to the church for like $300,000 or something. And this ties back into the salamander letter, because the guy who purchased the salamander letter from them then donated that letter to the church. He was going to be, I think he was a part of this, but it all came to, he decided that he was kind of getting into some dangerous waters with people finding out that he was forging this stuff. And so he ended up setting 2 bombs, to 2 guys that were part of the salamander purchase. Yeah, Mark Hoffman did. And so he killed one guy at his office in Salt Lake. He set another bomb at this other guy's house, which the guy's wife found the bomb, and she ended up dying because of it. And then the next day, there was a third bombing. And the third bombing was a car, and it was Mark Hoffman's car, in which he was in. And so there were these 3 bombings, and it kind of made it seem like at that point...
He was in the car when he bombed it?
At this point, I'm talking about the second episode of the 3. It kind of seems like maybe he was doing it to kind of throw people off his...
Right.
To
deter everybody.
He almost died. I mean, he lost fingers. He had to go into all
way.
these surgeries. Like, he fucked himself up. Well, the third episode, they say he told them that it was a suicide attempt. That he originally had it just in case he needed to get somebody else, but that at that point he was trying to commit suicide. But it didn't work. He lived. And then shortly after that, he gets arrested, and they start putting the pieces together. And he's still in the Utah State Correctional Facility. He tried to commit suicide in there once. He had been hoarding sleeping pills that he was getting from other inmates, and saved enough that he took some. And then the security guards came in, found him comatose, basically. When he passed out, he had fallen on his arm, and it cut off the circulation to his arm so much that he no longer has use of his arm. And that just made me think, there are some nights that I sleep on my arm and I wake up and I like can't feel like like how long was he laid on that before? Because anyhow, but yeah, he's still alive, and so yeah, it's an interesting documentary. It's really interesting, and like I said, I knew of Mark Hoffman. I remember some bombings, but I didn't know the extent of it. It was pretty.
So I think Cindy's question was, wow, why would they go so far out of the way to cover that up?
I mean, the answer why they would cover it up is because, like we just said earlier, it would do a lot of damage to people within the church saying, wait a minute, we've been told all our lives that this is how Joseph Smith got the Book of Mormon. Now this other thing comes out. They're buying it, believing that it's a real document.
Yeah.
So what's true, what's not true? So I had this conversation, like I said, with my sister and brother-in-law yesterday, actually. My brother-in-law was kind of stumped. He was like, I don't know. The only thing that they could really come up with is that the church, again, this is their thought process. The church believed they were true from the time, that they were true letters, but they were done to do harm to the church back then. That they were written as fake letters, fake information to do damage to the church back then. And that the church would buy them so that they could still, same kind of reason, they would still buy them to keep them underground so it wouldn't do any damage, but from that perspective as opposed to... So that was it. Good documentary though. There's one guy, I don't even know how to describe him. Just this fat old guy that dresses in like a full like 3-piece suit and has this raspy voice, and he's funny.
I haven't watched it. Maybe I'll go watch it. Maybe I'll check it out.
Yeah, it's a good documentary. Good call, Cindy, because I
So here's the thing. If you want to know more about the history of the church from a non-religious background, but more of a collaborative historical background, I referenced this earlier tonight. There's a really good podcast. It's on Spotify, and it's called Naked Mormonism. And this guy just goes through, and he has done the work. Like, I listen to him, and I go, damn, we need to do more work on our podcast. What is going on?
just keep going.
We need to do more work because this guy, his name is Bryce. I forget his last name. Man, he has gone through document after document after document and really studied the history of Mormonism from the outside perspective, from letters that were written at the time, from court documents about Joseph Smith. And he talks about this salamander letter. He talks about Martin Harris. He gives a full description.
See, I had never heard of the salamander letter. Sean told us last week that he knew of it.
Yeah.
In fact, it seems like he said that he heard about it in Australia. My brother-in-law had heard about it. But, yeah, that was a surprise because that's something that I'd never heard of. Excuse me, I gotta get this.
It's called Naked Mormonism. And it's definitely worth checking out. Definitely. I've been listening to it. Ryan recommended it to me. Not my brother Ryan, but Ryan, who was on the show that we screwed up the microphone with. So he's going to be coming back on. You guys are going to get a chance to meet with Ryan.
Good recommendation, Cindy.
Yeah, nice job.
So that's definitely something that's new and current. Just came out, I think, a week ago or so. So then, maybe the biggest thing that's happened in the last week or so was the interview with Meghan and Harry with Oprah.
Yeah, that was just fucked up.
And the reason I wanted to bring it up in here is because listening to it, and also if you don't watch The Crown is a good one to watch too because it talks to some of the things that I'm going to get into here. But it's kind of like you can imagine them being in a cult and trying to get out of a cult, and it being similar to what they've gone through. And towards the end of the interview, Oprah says something to Harry about Meghan kind of saving him from the institution of the crown.
They call it the institution or the firm. Those are the two words that they both use when talking about the crown. Because I don't think it's Elizabeth. I think it's the organization that...
I mean, Meghan talked about how great the Queen was to her, and he talks about how he's talked to her more in the last year than at any point of his life. And no, it's not the Queen; it's the institution of the crown. But one of the more interesting things I thought was when Oprah asked him that question about something to the effect of Meghan saving him from that. And he responded and said something to that effect. And then Meghan said, that's nice, but I would disagree. I would say that he saved our family. And when you think about it, for him, being born into that situation, into that family, into the institution of the crown, it was him that had to kind of pull the plug for himself and his family to get out of it, like to take that step to say, I'm getting out. Yeah. And that has to be kind of equal to getting out of a cult or out of any religion that has had a hold on your life for that amount of time.
Well, yeah, a deep organization. Let's be polite.
Well, I mean, they talk about how, everything's controlled. Everything they do is controlled. She talked about how her driver's license, her passport, all of these things were taken from her. She didn't see them again after she got married. They can't really do anything without getting permission to do it. It is kind of cultish in how that institution has control over them and everything they do.
Well,
and
how they can respond,
right? And the way it's presented to them is that it's their responsibility to live up to those things as members of the royal family, and they don't really have a choice. And that's one of the things about the crown and seeing. And I know that the crown isn't necessarily 100% factual, but you kind of see how the Queen goes through this process of where she's just this young girl trying to live her life. She's thrust into being the Queen, and now all of a sudden she's got to live her life by strict rules just because she's the Queen. And there's it seems watching that show, it doesn't seem like there's any room for her to veer off of that lane at all.
Yeah. Well, Cindy just said the king way back when, and which king are you talking about? Didn't get his way, so he created the Church of England.
Yeah.
She said, "Who does that?
Yeah.
Like, that's a cult. Well, I don't like what you're doing, so I'm gonna start my own church with my own rules and demand that you follow it."
Yeah, I think that had to do, and maybe you know more about it than me, Cindy, but it seemed like that had to do with him wanting to get divorced.
Oh.
And that within the Catholic Church that was there previously, that was such a no-no within the Catholic Church that he started his own church that would allow him to get divorced. Does that sound accurate, Cindy? Seems like I remember. I do remember what you're talking about, and it seems like that was the reason why. But yeah, it's just about control. It's about not being able to live your own life. And I think people have this grand picture of what it's like to be a prince and a princess, queen, king, and all this stuff. And I've thought for a long time, it just seems like it's not as glamorous as what I think people have this Disney perspective of what it means to be a prince and a princess, and it's just not that at all. And yeah, they've got tons of money and they get to do a lot of things that other people don't get to do, but it's all controlled within that institution.
I mean, just look at what it took for them to get out.
Right.
What they had to go through to get out. And I think it was interesting when Harry said that the reason they were able to do it was simply because of the money that Princess Diana had left for him.
Yeah,
That's
that was
what
something
gave them the opportunity to get out.
That was something I didn't know. He talks about how, so a lot of it talks about how they were told that their security detail was going to be taken away.
Yeah, their
And
protection.
at first, they just thought it was going to be their protection from Meghan and maybe their son at the time, who had just been born. But then Harry was told that he was losing his detail as well and could not figure that out. He's like, well, I'm still a prince within the royal family. There's still those threats.
Yeah, well, he said, has the threat level changed?
Right.
And they said no. He's like, so why is this going on? Like, why is this happening? It's crazy. It's just crazy. If you haven't seen the Oprah interview, watch it.
And it does. It goes, I mean, there's lots of different levels of it, obviously, but I think there's a lot of similarities to that and to people trying to get out of these religions that they've lived under their whole lives and felt like their lives have been kind of dictated by the rules within that religion. And when you're separating out of that religion, it's not just separating yourself from the religion itself, but from family members and friends and other people within it. And you look at what the situation they're in now, where it sounds like they have a decent enough relationship with his grandmother, the Queen.
I think it's getting better. It's probably getting... He said he talks to his dad now, so that's good.
Well, if you remember, she said, is he taking your calls now?
Yeah.
And he kind of laughs. He's like, yeah, he's taking my calls. But it doesn't sound like it was a great relationship.
All I know from watching The Crown is that Prince Charles is a dick.
Yeah, The Crown makes him kind of look like just a doofus, just a real bright.
Dick. He was just a dick to Diana and just wanted to be with Camilla. That's great, but instead of couldn't communicate, couldn't just say, "This is what I want."
Well, I think you got to be careful though, because I think a lot of that is probably based on the life that he's had and the expectations of him and having to deal with those and having to live a certain way so as not to make the family or the crown look bad.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was all those things, but I think a lot of that was probably based on just that life that he had
In the institution.
right
In the firm. Well, good on Harry. This is cheers for Harry for having the balls to stand up to the institution, to the system.
Well, one of the things that's interesting, and there's an episode in the last season of The Crown that, and there's several episodes that deal with the relationship of Princess Di and Prince Charles. There's one episode in particular that focuses more on her than anything else. And the similarities between her and what Meghan have gone through have been pretty eerie. Up to the Australia trip, up to interviews that they've done. So I just saw a thing today about the similarities between this last interview with Meghan and Harry and an interview that Prince Di did back in the day. It's eerily similar. And Prince Harry mentioned that. He said, we're over there, we're dealing with all this, and all I can see is history repeating itself. And so I'm going to do what I need to do to protect my family. We're not singing.
Is that the end of the episode?
What episode? Oh, this episode?
Giving them something to think about.
You don't got any more? I mean, I feel like I've kind of carried this episode.
You've done a great job too.
Yeah, so that's probably it.
Give you something to think about, something to go Google, something to go watch.
It's now 9:06, so that part 2 of Dave Johnson's episode is up now, so go check that out. If you haven't watched part 1, go watch that first. But yeah, we'll be back next week with another episode of Going Deep.
Maybe with Sean.
Maybe. We'll see. Thanks for watching, Cindy. Thanks for watching. Thanks for the input and questions. That helps. And till next week. Cheers. You didn't cheers.
Don't quit it.
Oh, I'm quitting it. You better cheers.
You better not quit it. Let me cheers
Hurry.
it. We need some
Cheers,
music
I
to
mean-
cheers it to. Like, we don't just go out like that.
Look.
We got to go out the right way. Let's
Then
go out
you
the
should
right
have
way.
taken care of that
Cindy's got
like
a
5 minutes
question.
ago.
What is Cindy's question?
She just was talking about the king that created the Church of England. She says, I don't remember the logistics, but I do think that began with King Henry VIII and the whole Boleyn sister situation. Holy shit.
Uh-oh, what?
Skip Ryan Harris.
Mr. Harris? That means him and Sierra laying in bed. What? Did he
They
make a
got-
comment?
He just said cheers, boys.
Oh.
They must got really bored.
All right, well, look, let's put on a song for them.
We started a song off.
Oh, no. We'll go to little Oscar and the Wolf. All right. Let us know what you want to hear, what you want us to talk about. If you've got a story and you're watching this and you've been thinking about coming on, you could be over here right now.
Or on Zoom.
Drinking with the Underground. Or on Zoom. But if you're local, if you're in the Salt Lake market,
And here's the thing, I'm sure mentioned this before, but this is, getting on and talking about your story, it's therapeutic for you, but I think there's people out there that gain a lot out of it too, because there's people that are dealing with similar situations, and it helps to hear that other people are going through it too. So,
you never know who needs to hear it. That's kind of the deal.
do you need to hear it?
Your episode got kind of cut because we cut it. So do you want to say hi? Hi. This is Aria. She should be in bed. And she's about to go to bed. So,
We're not
say
singing,
goodnight?
Skip. No singing this episode.
Yeah. Maybe a few more beers, but that ain't going to happen.
They're gonna be
All right, guys.
drunk.
Say goodbye.
They're gonna be drunk.
See you, everybody.